Sit back and enjoy 2 hours of fascinating facts you didn't know. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let's get started.
Every thought, every memory, and every emotion begins inside one of the most extraordinary organs in the known universe. Even though we use it every second of our lives, the brain still hides secrets that we are only beginning to understand. Join us on a journey through astonishing discoveries that reveal just how far the power of the human mind can reach. Your brain predicts the future a few seconds before reality unfolds. Your brain is not just a passive receiver of the present moment. It is a prediction machine. Every fraction of a second, your brain builds a model of what it expects to happen next, anticipating sounds, movements, and even the words you are about to hear. In fact, brain scans show that activity often increases in anticipation of an event before your senses actually register it. This predictive coding helps you catch a ball, understand speech even in noisy rooms, or move away from danger almost instantly. Without this ability, life would feel disconnected, as if reality arrived in jagged frames. Instead, your brain smooths out the world, always staying one heartbeat ahead, making sure your experience feels seamless, continuous, and alive. Scientists have reconstructed images directly from brain signals. One of the most astonishing frontiers in neuroscience is the ability to look inside the mind and reconstruct its contents using functional magnetic resonance imaging and artificial intelligence. Researchers have successfully reconstructed approximate images of what people are looking at, including shapes, faces, and even simple movie clips, using nothing more than patterns of brain activity. Although the results are blurry, they capture enough detail to be recognizable, suggesting that thoughts and perceptions leave measurable fingerprints in neural activity. This technology opens both exciting and unsettling possibilities. One day, we may be able to record dreams, visualize memories, or even share inner experiences in ways that seem like science fiction today. For now, these experiments reveal something remarkable. The private theater of the mind, long hidden from the outside world, can be glimpsed through the brain's brilliant electrical language. Your brain can trick you into seeing things that are not really there. Perception is not simply a mirror of reality. Sometimes your brain invents details, colors, or patterns that do not exist in the world around you. Classic optical illusions offer a subtle demonstration of this, showing how lines can appear longer, colors can seem brighter, or shapes can appear to move when nothing is actually happening. But the effect runs even deeper during moments of sensory deprivation, stress, or illness. The brain can generate complete hallucinations, sounds, visions, and even entire scenes that feel completely real. This happens because your brain is always trying to interpret incomplete information, filling in the gaps with its best guess. Most of the time, this makes perception smooth and useful. Occasionally, however, it goes too far, creating a ghost where none exists. It is a humbling reminder that what we call reality is always filtered and reconstructed within the theater of the mind. People with split brains sometimes behave as if two minds share the same body. In rare medical cases where the connection between the brain's two hemispheres, known as the corpus callosum, is severed, something astonishing can happen. Each hemisphere begins to act with a degree of independence, as if two separate consciousnesses were sharing the same body. One hand may reach for a shirt while the other pushes it away. A person may verbally deny seeing an object presented to one eye while the other hand still points directly toward it. These split brain studies reveal that the left and right hemispheres specialize in different functions, and that our sense of being a unified self is a delicate construction. Beneath the seamless unity we experience, the brain is actually a federation of processes. Cut the connections between them, and the mind's hidden multiplicity emerges, showing us just how fragile the illusion of a single identity truly is. The brain sometimes creates completely false stories to explain missing pieces. Your brain hates uncertainty. When something does not make sense, it will often invent an explanation, and you may believe it without hesitation. This phenomenon, known as confabulation, occurs when the brain fills in gaps in memory or explains actions in ways that feel coherent but are actually false. For example, People with certain brain injuries may insist that they have eaten breakfast when they have not, or confidently explain why they chose an object, even though the real reason is hidden from their awareness. Confabulation is not lying. It is the brain's way of preserving a continuous narrative of the self. And it does not happen only in cases of brain injury. Everyday memory works the same way, smoothing over mistakes and stitching fragments together into continuous stories. Much of what you think of as memory is not a perfect record, but a carefully crafted fiction created by the mind. Some people can remember every day of their lives in extraordinary detail. For most of us, memory is selective and hazy, and yesterday blends into last week. But a small number of people possess an extraordinary gift known as highly superior autobiographical memory, or hyperthymesia. These individuals can remember the weather, conversations, and even what they ate on almost any day of their lives, going back decades. Ask them about a random date, and they can tell you the day of the week, what news stories were making, headlines, and what they were wearing. Brain scans suggest that their memory networks are unusually active and densely connected, although scientists still do not fully understand why. Interestingly, this gift can feel more like a burden. The inability to forget means reliving painful experiences just as vividly as joyful ones. Their minds function like living archives, preserving a detailed and relentless timeline of existence. It is a reminder of just how remarkably varied human memory can be. Brain generates enough electricity to power a small light bulb. Although your brain runs on chemistry and biology, it is also an electrical powerhouse. At any given moment, billions of neurons are firing, sending signals across tiny gaps through rapid bursts of electricity. The combined electrical output of this network is enough to power a small 20-watt light-emitting diode light bulb. It is a humbling comparison. Inside your skull, thoughts, memories, and emotions depend on faint electrical currents flickering through tissue softer than tofu. The brain's electrical nature also makes it readable by machines. Technologies such as electroencephalography capture the brain's faint wave patterns, turning invisible activity into measurable signals. These patterns reveal whether you are awake, dreaming, or in deep sleep. The idea that the center of your mind, the place where your conscious experience exists, is also a living electrical field glowing softly with energy is both fascinating and beautiful. Your brain is more active at night than during the day. You might think that sleep is a time when the brain shuts down, but the exact opposite is true. During many stages of sleep, especially rapid eye movement sleep, the brain is filled with activity. In some regions, it is even more active than when you are awake. Neurons fire in patterns that strengthen memories, process emotions, and weave together the strange images we call dreams. This hidden activity is why you often wake up with solutions to problems, flashes of creativity, or a lighter emotional burden. While the body rests, the brain runs its nighttime workshop, sorting, repairing, and reshaping the mind. To outside observers, you appear still, even unconscious. But inside your head, an entire universe of activity unfolds, carrying you through landscapes of memory and imagination. During its busiest hours, the sleeping brain works quietly, reinventing you for the next morning. Brains of blind people can repurpose the visual cortex for touch and sound. When someone is blind, especially from birth, the brain does not allow the unused visual cortex to remain inactive. Instead, it recruits that vast region of neurons for other senses, enhancing touch, hearing, and even smell. This remarkable rewiring explains why blind people often develop extraordinary abilities, such as reading Braille at incredible speed or detecting subtle sounds that sighted people would miss. Brain scans show that their visual cortex becomes active when their fingers trace patterns or when they navigate using sound. This remarkable adaptability, known as neuroplasticity, reveals that the brain is not rigidly wired but astonishingly flexible, ready to reorganize itself according to the body's needs. It suggests that every brain contains untapped potential, waiting to be awakened if circumstances demand it. The brain is not a fixed map, but a living, evolving landscape capable of rewriting itself. People who lose one sense often develop extraordinary abilities in another. When one door to the world closes, others can open wide. People who lose their hearing may develop enhanced vision, detecting the slightest movements with astonishing sensitivity. Those who lose their sight may notice faint textures or subtle sounds with remarkable precision. This phenomenon is not just poetic. It is measurable. The brain redistributes its resources, expanding the regions devoted to the remaining senses. In some cases, these abilities seem almost superhuman, such as identifying people solely by the sound of their footsteps or navigating through spaces using subtle echoes. These adaptations show that the brain is always seeking balance, constantly recalibrating itself to maximize survival and perception. They remind us that human potential is deeply elastic. Hidden abilities lie dormant, waiting for the brain's extraordinary flexibility to bring them to light. Within every mind lives a quiet promise, the power to change, adapt, and evolve in ways that challenge expectations. Some people see sounds or hear colors through synesthesia. For most of us, the senses remain separate. We hear music, see colors, and taste food. But for people with synesthesia, those boundaries become blurred. A sound may be filled with color, letters may appear tinted with different shades, or numbers may have textures and personalities. To them, the world is enriched by overlapping senses that feel completely natural. Scientists believe this happens because the neural pathways between sensory regions are unusually interconnected, allowing signals to blend together. Some people with synesthesia report tasting shapes or feeling the texture of sounds. This rare phenomenon is more than just a curiosity. It can enhance memory and creativity because experiences become layered and unforgettable. Famous artists, composers, and writers have described experiencing it, suggesting that synesthesia may have inspired some of humanity's most brilliant creative expressions. It is a reminder that perception is not fixed but deeply personal. Every brain paints its own version of reality. The brain can adapt to seeing the world upside down. Imagine wearing special glasses that completely flip the world upside down. At first, everything feels impossible. Walking, reaching for objects, even pouring water becomes a challenge. But after days or weeks, the brain begins to adapt. Astonishingly, it can reorganize perception so that the upside-down world starts to feel completely normal. When the glasses are removed, the adjustment reverses once again, and ordinary vision may feel strangely inverted until the brain recalibrates. This experiment, performed in different forms for more than a century, demonstrates the brain's remarkable plasticity, its ability to reinterpret sensory input in order to adapt to reality. It means that perception is not simply about the eyes. It is about how the brain interprets and organizes information. Reality is flexible, shaped in whatever way the mind can make sense of it. The fact that the world can literally be turned upside down and then feel normal again is proof of just how adaptable the brain truly is. The brain creates a constant stream of predictions about what will happen next. Your brain is not just reacting, it is constantly making predictions. Every sound, every movement, and every glance is matched against expectations about what should happen next. When someone is speaking, your brain anticipates the end of the sentence before the words even arrive. When you walk through a familiar room in the dark, your mind maps out where everything should be. This predictive coding smooths out reality, allowing you to move through the world without being surprised every moment. Sometimes those predictions fail, as in optical illusions, where expectations override what is actually true. But most of the time, they save you milliseconds. And those fractions of a second can mean the difference between life and death. The brain's endless forecasting makes experience feel continuous, as though reality flows instead of stuttering. In a sense, you are always living slightly ahead of the present moment. Your mind leans toward what has not yet happened, blending the present and the future into one continuous flow. People can have out-of-body experiences triggered by brain stimulation. Some people describe the unsettling sensation of floating above their bodies, watching themselves from the outside. Mystics have written about this for centuries, but neuroscience has discovered that the experience can sometimes be induced artificially. Electrical stimulation of the temporoparietal junction, a region that helps integrate vision, balance, and body awareness, can cause patients to feel as though they are leaving their bodies even while lying completely still. This suggests that our sense of being inside ourselves is a construction of the brain, woven together from sensory input. When those signals become misaligned, the sense of self can seem displaced. Although these experiences remain deeply mysterious and often profoundly meaningful, they point to a simple truth. Even the most intimate feeling of being yourself is carefully generated by the brain and can shift, unravel, or transform under the right conditions. Identity itself is a fragile illusion built upon neural balance. Electrical brain stimulation can make people laugh against their will. During neurosurgery, doctors sometimes apply tiny electrical currents to brain tissue in order to map its functions. In rare cases, stimulating certain regions causes patients to suddenly burst into uncontrollable laughter. They are fully aware of how strange the situation is but cannot stop, often describing the moment as inexplicably funny, even though nothing amusing is actually happening. In a similar way, other forms of stimulation can trigger tears, fear, or a flood of memories. These discoveries show how emotions, which feel so personal and profound, can be switched on like lights when the right neural circuits are activated. That does not make emotions any less real, but it reveals that joy, sorrow, and wonder are rooted in precise biological machinery. The idea that laughter, one of our purest expressions of delight, can be triggered by a gentle spark of electricity is both unsettling and remarkable, blurring the line between the mechanical and the deeply human. A brain injury caused one man to believe that his parents had been replaced by imposters. In a rare neurological condition known as Capgras syndrome, patients recognize the faces of their loved ones but insist that they are imposters. One man, after suffering a brain injury, looked at his parents and became convinced that they had been replaced by convincing doubles. Scientists believe this happens because the pathway linking visual recognition to the brain's emotional centers has been disrupted. The face is seen and correctly identified, but it fails to trigger the familiar emotional warmth that normally accompanies recognition. That mismatch convinces the mind that something deeply wrong has happened. Cases like this reveal just how fragile the connections between recognition, memory, and emotion truly are. For the person affected, the delusion is completely real, a terrifying fracture in the fabric of trust. It shows that our sense of reality, and even our family bonds, depend on the seamless cooperation of hidden circuits deep within the brain. Damage to a specific area of the brain left a woman unable to feel fear. In an extraordinary case, a woman with damage to the amygdala, the almond-shaped structure that plays a central role in processing fear, became almost completely fearless. She could handle snakes and spiders, walk alone through dark alleys, and watch horror movies without flinching. While that may sound liberating, fear is an essential survival tool that keeps us away from danger. Without it, she became more vulnerable to real threats. Her case gave neuroscientists profound insight into how emotions are localized and how specific brain regions shape our inner lives. Fear, often experienced as a vague sense of dread, is actually rooted in physical structures. When those structures are damaged, the emotion itself can disappear. It demonstrates both the power and the fragility of our biology. Something as primal and universal as fear can be erased by even the smallest injury to the brain's intricate circuitry. The brain can react to danger before you become aware of it. Imagine stepping off the curb and instantly jerking backward as a car speeds past, only realizing a moment later what just happened. That incredible speed comes from pathways in the brain that bypass conscious thought. Visual information can travel directly to the amygdala, triggering a cascade of fight or flight responses before you have time to think. Your heart races, your muscles tense, and you leap to safety in less than half a second. Conscious awareness catches up only afterward, weaving a story around the reflex. These hidden circuits prove that survival depends on reaction times far faster than deliberate thought can provide. They also show that your experience of life is always running slightly behind, with unconscious processes guiding you first. In this way, the brain is both protector and storyteller, acting on your behalf and then filling in the narrative so that you feel as though you were in control all along. Einstein's brain had unusual folds and connections. After Albert Einstein's death, his brain was preserved and studied, revealing several unusual features. The parietal lobes, which are linked to spatial reasoning and mathematics, were noticeably larger, and certain regions displayed unique folds and patterns not seen in most people. His corpus callosum, the bridge connecting the brain's two hemispheres, also appeared thicker, suggesting greater communication between different areas of the brain. While no single feature explains his genius, these differences point to a possible biological foundation for his extraordinary imagination. However, Einstein himself emphasized curiosity, persistence, and playfulness as the true driving forces behind discovery. His brain reminds us that structure matters, but the brilliance of the mind also grows from habits of thinking, a sense of wonder, and relentless exploration. It is a blend of nature and nurture. The brain's physical canvas shaped by a lifetime of creative inquiry and imagination. London taxi drivers develop larger brain regions for navigation. To qualify as a taxi driver in London, drivers must memorize thousands of streets and landmarks throughout the city. Brain scans have shown that these drivers develop enlarged hippocampi, the brain's navigation centers. The more years they spend navigating the city, the larger this region becomes. It is a clear demonstration that experience shapes anatomy. This discovery was one of the first to reveal neuroplasticity in adults on such a remarkable scale. It means that the brain does not become fixed after childhood but continues to reshape itself in response to challenge and practice. Whether learning music, languages, or the layout of a city, the brain builds new structures to meet new demands. For these drivers, that adaptation becomes a living art engraved into neural tissue. Their minds carry a miniature London within them. It is a testament to the way effort sculpts the very architecture of the brain. Music can shape the brain more than almost any other activity. When you play a musical instrument, your brain activates nearly every major region at the same time. Motor areas control your fingers, auditory regions process sound, and emotional centers respond to melody and harmony. Over time, this full brain workout leaves a physical mark. Studies show that musicians often have a larger corpus callosum, the bundle of nerve fibers connecting the two hemispheres, allowing faster communication throughout the brain. Regions involved in hearing, memory, and motor coordination also become denser and more active. Even simply listening to music can strengthen neural connections, improving mood regulation and memory. It is no surprise that music therapy is used to support recovery after strokes and promote emotional healing. Music is not just entertainment. It is a form of structured sound that sculpts the brain, reshaping neural circuits and leaving echoes of rhythm and harmony woven into the very architecture of the mind. Creativity activates different brain circuits than logical thinking. Logic and creativity often seem like opposites, yet both depend on the brain's remarkable networks. When you solve a math problem, the brain's executive and analytical circuits take control, emphasizing order and precision. But when you paint, write, or improvise, completely different circuits come alive, especially the default mode network and the associative areas that connect distant concepts. Brain scans show that creative thinking involves unusual patterns of connectivity, like a neural jazz session where unexpected regions begin playing together. Interestingly, the most creative moments often occur when analytical areas quiet down, allowing freer associations to emerge. This balance explains why creativity often flourishes when you are relaxed, daydreaming, or just before falling asleep. The brain's ability to switch modes, from razor-sharp analysis to open-ended invention, is what makes human thought both practical and deeply imaginative, capable of designing rockets and composing symphonies with the very same neural canvas. Eureka moments come from an unusual synchronization of brain waves. The sudden flash of insight, the familiar aha or eureka moment, feels almost magical. But neuroscience shows that it emerges from a shift in brainwave patterns. Just before a breakthrough, the brain often enters a burst of gamma wave activity, a rhythm associated with deep integration across distant brain regions. These waves allow connections to form between ideas that previously seemed unrelated. It is as though the brain suddenly falls into harmony, creating clarity out of chaos. These moments are unpredictable, but they can be encouraged through relaxation, play, or by stepping away from a problem. That is why solutions often appear in the shower, during a walk, or in a dream. Insight feels sudden, But in reality, your brain has been working beneath conscious awareness, quietly assembling the pieces of the puzzle. When everything finally falls into place, the solution rises into consciousness, a neural spark that feels like a gift from nowhere. Your brain builds entirely new pathways whenever you learn something. Every time you learn a new skill, memorize a fact, or practice a movement, your brain changes. Neurons extend themselves to form new synapses, strengthening the pathways that support the behavior. Over time, repeated use makes these circuits more efficient, as though the brain were carving a well-worn trail through a forest. This physical remodeling is called neuroplasticity, and it is the foundation of all growth and learning. Remarkably, even simple repetition, such as practicing piano scales or reviewing vocabulary, leaves new structures within the brain. These pathways can expand or shrink depending on how often they are used. Use it or lose it is literally true for neural circuits. The process never stops and continues into old age, although it becomes more gradual. Every lesson you absorb reshapes you, leaving lasting marks on the architecture of your mind and influencing both who you are and who you are still becoming. Stress can physically shrink parts of the brain. While brief bursts of stress can sharpen focus and prepare the body for action, chronic stress takes a toll on the brain. Prolonged exposure to stress hormones such as cortisol can shrink the hippocampus, a region that is critical for memory and learning. It can also weaken connections in the prefrontal cortex, affecting decision-making and emotional regulation. At the same time, stress can enlarge the amygdala, intensifying fear and anxiety responses. This reshaping creates a cycle in which stress makes the brain more vulnerable to even more stress. The good news is that the brain is resilient. Practices such as mindfulness, exercise, and meaningful social connection can reverse some of these changes, helping restore balance. Stress literally shapes the mind, but recovery does as well. It is a powerful reminder that mental states are not abstract clouds floating above the brain, but biological forces that carve pathways into its very structure. Meditation can thicken the brain regions linked to calmness and focus. Meditation may feel like nothing more than sitting quietly, but profound changes unfold inside the brain. Brain scans show that regular meditation can increase the thickness of the prefrontal cortex, improving attention and emotional regulation. It also strengthens connectivity within networks related to empathy and compassion while reducing activity in the amygdala, easing stress and emotional reactivity. Long-term practitioners often show structural increases in gray matter density, particularly in regions associated with self-awareness and perspective-taking. These changes have been observed even in beginners after only a few weeks of practice, demonstrating that the benefits are not limited to a lifetime of dedication. In a world filled with constant noise and stimulation, meditation offers a way to literally shape the brain toward greater calm. The quiet repetition of breathing and awareness is enough to sculpt new neural circuits, showing that peace of mind is not just a feeling, but a skill your brain can develop. Masters of advanced meditation can control their body temperature through thought alone. High in the Himalayas, monks practicing advanced meditation techniques have been observed drying wet sheets draped over their shoulders in freezing temperatures using only body heat generated through focused mental practice. Scientists studying this phenomenon have found that certain meditation techniques can influence the autonomic nervous system, regulating heart rate, blood pressure, and even body temperature. Brain scans reveal unusual patterns of activity during these states, suggesting that years of disciplined practice can unlock access to bodily processes that are usually considered automatic. Although very few people reach this level of mastery, these experiments reveal the astonishing influence the mind can have over the body. The idea that focused thought alone can warm the body in freezing winds feels almost superhuman, yet it arises from the same human brain we all share. It demonstrates the extraordinary depth of untapped potential quietly woven into the folds of our minds. Daydreaming activates a special brain network. When your thoughts drift away, your brain is not shutting down. It is switching networks. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, a constellation of brain regions that become active when you are at rest and not focused on the outside world. This network weaves together memories, imagines possible futures, and explores scenarios through a kind of internal simulation. Far from being inactive, Daydreaming is essential for creativity, problem-solving, and even empathy. During these moments of quiet mental wandering, your brain weaves experiences into stories, shaping the narrative of your life. The wandering mind is not a distraction from reality but an expansion of it, testing paths you have not yet taken. So the next time your attention drifts, remember that your brain is busy inside its own theater, painting landscapes, rehearsing possible futures, and weaving the fabric of your inner world. Memory is rewritten every time you recall it. We often imagine memory as a video archive that faithfully preserves past events. But neuroscience reveals that memory is dynamic. Every time you remember an event, your brain reconstructs it from fragments scattered across different regions. During this process, details can be altered, forgotten, or even unintentionally replaced. This phenomenon, called reconsolidation, means that memory is less like a stored file and more like a story being retold, changing slightly with each telling. It explains why eyewitness testimony can be unreliable or why cherished memories shift over time. But it also allows memories to be updated, softening trauma or reshaping learning. In a sense, the past is always alive, rewriting itself in the present. Every memory you revisit is not a static recording, but a living narrative adapted to who you are now, showing that your sense of personal history is itself a work of imagination. Traumatic memories can alter the physical structure of the brain. Severe trauma does not only haunt the mind, it becomes embedded in the brain's anatomy. Post-traumatic stress disorder is associated with shrinkage of the hippocampus, increased activity in the amygdala, and weaker control from the prefrontal cortex. These changes help explain why traumatic memories can feel vivid, intrusive, and emotionally overwhelming. The brain essentially shifts into a state of hypervigilance, as though danger were always nearby. But research also shows that with therapy, support, and time, some of these structural changes can heal, with the hippocampus regaining volume and regulatory pathways becoming stronger. Trauma reshapes the brain, but recovery reshapes it as well. Every pathway altered by fear can be countered by new circuits of safety and resilience. The scars of trauma are written into neural tissue, but so are the patterns of healing, a testament to the brain's enduring capacity for renewal. The brain can erase memories under certain conditions. Memory feels permanent, but in reality, it is fragile and flexible. Scientists have discovered that under certain conditions, particularly when memories are reactivated and enter a flexible state called reconsolidation, they can be altered and even erased. In animal studies, specific medications given at the right moment can block the storage of a memory, effectively removing it. Although this research is still in its early stages, it raises both hopeful and unsettling possibilities. The ability to weaken traumatic memories for therapy or the risk of manipulating memory itself. Even without medication, the brain sometimes erases memories naturally, pruning unused connections to make room for new learning. Forgetting is not a flaw but a function, a way of keeping the mind clear. It shows that memory is not carved in stone but written in sand, always vulnerable to being reshaped, softened, or completely erased. Scientists can sometimes activate lost memories through electrical stimulation. During certain neurosurgical procedures, when electrodes stimulate specific brain regions, patients suddenly recall vivid memories that had been forgotten for many years. A woman may hear her childhood piano lessons as though they were happening again, or a man may relive standing on a familiar street corner decades earlier. These moments are not vague impressions, but detailed sensory recreations complete with sounds, smells, and emotions. The effect suggests that even memories believed to be long forgotten may still exist as hidden neural traces, waiting for the right spark to bring them back to life. This discovery reveals the depth of the brain's storage capacity, a vast archive far larger than everyday consciousness can access. Although science is still far from being able to summon memories at will, these glimpses show that your past may not be gone but dormant, embedded within the folds of the mind like books on an endless shelf waiting to be reopened. Memories can be strengthened during sleep through subtle cues. During sleep, your brain does not simply rest. It consolidates memory, weaving the day's experiences into lasting form. Experiments show that memories can even be strengthened through subtle cues. In one study, Participants learned sets of word, pairs, or spatial tasks while a specific sound or scent was presented. Later, when the same cue was played or released softly during deep sleep, those memories became stronger, as though the brain were rehearsing them unconsciously. This phenomenon, called targeted memory reactivation, highlights how the sleeping brain actively sorts, strengthens, and sometimes reshapes the day's information. It suggests that learning does not stop when you close your eyes. In fact, sleep may be the most important stage of all. The idea that a faint scent or gentle tone can reach the dreaming brain and strengthen a memory is both unsettling and remarkable. The brain replays experiences like a movie during dreams. While you sleep, your brain is far from inactive. Neurons fire in patterns that resemble waking activity, as though replaying the day's experiences like scenes from a movie. In animals, scientists have recorded brain cells firing in the same sequence during sleep as they did while exploring a maze, compressed like a fast motion replay. In humans, dreams often reflect fragments of recent life woven together into surreal narratives. This replay is believed to help consolidate memory by reactivating the neural circuits involved in learning. It is as though the brain were editing a film of your life, selecting important frames and storing them in long-term memory. The result is both practical and poetic. The dream world serves as both rehearsal and archive, taking the raw footage of waking life and shaping it into something lasting, a record preserved within the hidden vaults of the mind. Dreams may be the brain's way of cleaning and reorganizing itself. Why do we dream? One intriguing idea is that dreams serve as the brain's nightly cleanup process. By weaving strange stories, the brain may be testing associations, pruning weak connections, and strengthening useful ones. This process could explain why dreams often combine unrelated images or people. The brain is reorganizing memory networks, testing combinations, discarding some, and preserving others. The bizarre narratives may simply be a side effect of this deeper work. Some researchers also suggest that dreaming helps regulate emotion by replaying stressful events in safer, symbolic forms. Whatever their exact purpose, dreams appear to be more than idle fantasy. They are the brain's nighttime workshop, fine-tuning its circuits, clearing away the day's clutter, and reorganizing the mind for greater clarity. The surreal landscapes of dreams may be the visible trace of a hidden process, the brain quietly tending to itself in the dark. Sleep helps remove waste from the brain. During the day, your brain produces metabolic waste, including proteins linked to disorders such as Alzheimer's disease. At night, something remarkable happens. Brain cells shrink slightly, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow through the tissue and wash away waste. This glymphatic system acts like a nightly rinse cycle, removing toxins and restoring balance. The process is so effective that even one night of poor sleep causes a measurable increase in waste accumulation. This discovery highlights the vital role of sleep not only in memory and mood, but also in the physical health of the brain. Just as the body needs rest to heal, the brain needs sleep to clean itself. When you fall asleep, you are not only restoring energy, but also bathing the mind in its own quiet tide, sweeping away what is no longer needed and leaving behind a clearer, renewed landscape for the thoughts of the next day. The brain shrinks slightly during the day and expands again at night. Your brain changes subtly in size over the course of a single day. Magnetic resonance imaging reveals that the brain shrinks slightly during waking hours, compressed by the demands of activity, and then expands again during sleep as it recovers. This rhythm reflects the ebb and flow of fluid, cellular activity, and metabolic processes, a daily tide inside the skull. The changes amount to small fractions of a percent, but they are significant enough to be measured. This may be one reason why you feel mentally foggy after long days and refreshed after rest. Your brain has literally changed shape, contracting under the strain of wakefulness and gently swelling again during sleep. This cycle reminds us that the brain is not a static stone, but living tissue in constant motion, pulsing with fluids, expanding and shrinking like the tide, following the silent rhythms of day and night. Your brain keeps working while you sleep. Far from shutting down, your brain remains busy while you are asleep. It sorts memories, regulates hormones, fine-tunes immune responses, and rehearses skills learned during the day. Certain stages of sleep are especially active, with brain activity resembling wakefulness. This hidden work explains why sleep deprivation affects mood, memory, and health so quickly. It also explains the flashes of creativity or sudden clarity that sometimes greet you when you wake up. The brain has been solving problems in the background. In this sense, sleep is less about shutting down and more about changing modes, shifting from external engagement to internal maintenance. Every night, while the body lies still, the brain becomes a silent workshop that repairs, reinforces, and reorganizes. It reminds us that rest is not inactivity, but an essential part of being alive, during which the brain's unseen work prepares you for another day. The brain can produce psychedelic states on its own, even without drugs. Psychedelic visions are not limited to substances. The brain can generate them spontaneously. Under conditions such as sensory deprivation, fasting, meditation, or even illness, people sometimes report vivid geometric patterns, lights, or mystical experiences. Scientists suggest that these occur when normal brain rhythms are disrupted, allowing deeper networks to release chaotic imagery into consciousness. Remarkably, these experiences often involve the same neural pathways activated by psychedelic drugs, showing that the potential for such visions exists within everyone. The mind's kaleidoscope is built in, waiting beneath the surface. This may explain why cultures throughout history have described visions during trance, prayer, or near-death experiences. The brain itself carries the seeds of altered states capable of producing worlds of light, color, and meaning without any external catalyst. The capacity for wonder woven into neural tissue is part of what makes consciousness so strange and profound. Some people can control their dreams through lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is the rare ability to realize that you are dreaming while the dream continues. With practice, some people can even shape the dream, flying through imagined skies or speaking with dream characters. Neuroscientists have found that lucid dreaming involves unusual activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain linked to self-awareness and control. Training methods such as performing reality checks during the day or setting intentions before sleep can increase the likelihood of having lucid dreams. These experiences feel remarkably real, combining the vividness of dreaming with the clarity of being awake. For some people, lucid dreaming is simply a playful form of exploration. For others, it is a tool for creativity, therapy, or overcoming nightmares. The idea that you can awaken inside your own dream and direct the story of the night shows how thin the boundary between reality and imagination can be inside the brain. Your brain contains more connections than there are stars in the Milky Way. Inside your skull is a network so vast that it defies comprehension. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. Each one can form thousands of connections called synapses. Together, the total number of connections reaches hundreds of trillions, more than the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. These connections are not static. They strengthen, weaken, or disappear according to experience, forming the constantly changing map of who you are. Every thought, memory, and skill depends on the patterns within this astronomical network. It is humbling to realize that the night sky, filled with countless stars, is reflected in miniature within each of us. The scale suggests that the brain is not merely an organ, but a cosmos in its own right. A galaxy of living connections that constantly shift, flicker, and weave the story of your life. The brain generates hallucinations without any external stimulus. Hallucinations are not always caused by drugs or illness. Sometimes the brain produces them on its own. In sensory deprivation chambers, people often begin seeing lights and patterns or hearing phantom sounds after only a few hours. People with Parkinson's disease may glimpse small animals or figures that are not really there. Even healthy people can experience hypnagogic hallucinations while falling asleep. These are vivid images and sounds created entirely by the brain. These experiences occur because perception is not a direct window into reality. It is a construction assembled from incoming signals and the brain's predictions. When the flow of information is interrupted or circuits malfunction, the brain fills the void with its own creations. Hallucinations remind us that consciousness is not a fixed recording of the world, but a living, generative process. Sometimes the brain becomes its own projector, casting images onto the screen of awareness without any outside world providing them. Burst of electricity can change your mood in seconds. The brain runs on electricity, and even a tiny current applied in the right place can alter how you feel. In clinical settings, direct stimulation of certain brain regions has been shown to relieve depression almost instantly, replace despair with laughter, or create an intense sense of calm. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, which uses pulses of magnetic fields, can similarly influence mood and cognition. These treatments are being explored as therapies for conditions that do not respond to medication, offering new hope to people suffering from chronic depression or anxiety. The effects can be astonishing. Sadness fades, joy appears, or fear dissolves, all because of a few seconds of electrical influence. Although the brain is the seat of identity, these experiments demonstrate that emotions that feel deeply personal are also products of physical circuits. A change in electrical activity can spread into the most intimate experiences of the mind, transforming perception and mood in an instant. Placebos can trigger real changes in brain chemistry. The placebo effect is not only in your head, it is literally in your brain. When someone believes that a treatment will help, the brain often responds by releasing real chemicals that mirror the expected effect. Placebo painkillers can prompt the brain to release endorphins, natural opioids that are stronger than many medications. Placebo antidepressants can adjust serotonin pathways, improving mood. These effects can be seen in brain scans. The same circuits that respond to medicine often respond to belief. The nocebo effect highlights how expectation and trust are powerful biological forces capable of shaping perception, pain, and healing. It blurs the line between mind and body, showing that belief itself can act as a form of medicine. The brain is not merely a passive recipient of treatment, but an active participant in healing, capable of calling upon its own pharmacy when the promise of relief is convincing enough. The brain creates its own painkillers, stronger than morphine. Hidden within your brain are natural opioids, chemicals that reduce pain and create calm, called endorphins and enkephalins. These molecules bind to the same receptors targeted by morphine, sometimes producing even stronger effects. They flood the body during exercise, laughter, and moments of stress, acting as an internal shield. The runner's high is one example, a euphoric state in which pain dissolves into pleasure as endorphin levels rise. Similarly, people in emergency situations sometimes report feeling no pain from their injuries until much later, when the brain's natural painkillers fade. These systems evolved to help humans survive danger and hardship, masking pain long enough to escape or fight. This means that your brain carries its own pharmacy, ready to release powerful medicine whenever necessary. Every moment of relief, joy, or endurance can be traced back to these silent molecules glowing within the hidden chemistry of your brain. The same brain circuit activates for both physical and emotional pain. Heartbreak hurts. And in a way, it truly does. Neuroscientists have discovered that the same brain regions that become active when you stub your toe or burn your hand also activate when you experience rejection, grief, or social loss. The anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, key centers for processing pain, do not make much distinction between physical injury and emotional suffering. This overlap suggests that social bonds are as vital to survival as avoiding physical harm. Evolution may have connected emotional pain to the same circuits to ensure that we remain connected to others. This explains why loneliness and loss can feel physically crushing and why painkillers can sometimes ease emotional suffering. The discovery reveals how deeply intertwined the physical and emotional worlds are. In the brain, pain is not merely a sensation, but a signal of a broken connection. Laughter activates multiple regions throughout the brain at once. Laughter may seem effortless, but it is one of the most complex actions the brain performs. It involves the prefrontal cortex, which processes context and humor, the limbic system, which handles emotion, and the motor cortex, which coordinates the rhythmic movements of breathing and the voice. Brain scans show that laughter is not limited to a single point, but lights up circuits throughout the brain in a cascade of joy. This widespread activation may be why laughter feels so freeing. It synchronizes many regions at once. Laughter also floods the brain with endorphins, reducing stress and strengthening connection. It is a social glue that brings people together through a shared rhythm. The act that feels spontaneous and joyful is actually a symphony of neural activity. Every burst of laughter is a whole brain performance, reminding us that joy is not only felt in the heart, but orchestrated in the brain. The brain's mirror neurons make you feel the emotions of others. When you see someone smile, your brain does not simply recognize it. In part, it mirrors it. Special cells called mirror neurons activate both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform it. They are believed to contribute to empathy, allowing you to feel echoes of other people's emotions. This is why seeing someone cry can make your throat tighten, or watching someone yawn can trigger a yawn in you. Mirror neurons blur the boundary between the self and others, weaving invisible threads of connection. They may have been crucial for learning and social bonding, allowing humans to share skills and emotions within a group. Although their exact role is still debated, the idea is profound. Much of what you feel is not yours alone, but a reflection of the world around you. In many ways, your brain is an empathetic mirror. The brain can create a sense of time speeding up or slowing down. Have you noticed how time seems to stretch during moments of fear or collapse into flashes during moments of joy? This distortion begins in the brain. Internal clocks distributed across regions such as the basal ganglia and the cerebellum constantly track intervals. But emotion, attention, and arousal distort those signals, making seconds feel longer or shorter than they actually are. During emergencies, the brain stores more detailed memories, creating the impression that time has slowed down. In states of flow, while playing music, painting, or running, the opposite occurs, and hours disappear in what feels like minutes. Time is not absolute in the mind, but elastic, shaped by circumstances and emotions. The physical clock may move at a steady pace, but the brain's sense of time is fluid, stretching and compressing to fit the landscape of experience, giving every moment a uniquely human texture. Lingual brains develop denser gray matter than monolingual brains. Speaking more than one language does more than expand communication. It reshapes the brain itself. Bilingual people often show greater gray matter density in regions linked to memory, attention, and executive control. Constantly switching between languages strengthens the brain's flexibility, improving the ability to multitask and concentrate. It also appears to protect against cognitive decline, delaying the onset of dementia. In some studies, the act of juggling vocabulary and grammar builds resilience in the mind, like a workout for neural circuits. Even learning a new language later in life can stimulate growth, demonstrating that the brain never loses its ability to change. The benefits extend beyond language. Bilingual brains tend to show sharper problem-solving abilities and more adaptable patterns of thought. Every word learned is not only a tool for speaking, but a building block in the architecture of a stronger and more resilient brain. Reading activates almost the entire brain at once. When you read a sentence, it seems simple, almost automatic. But inside, your brain is performing a symphony of activity. The visual cortex decodes the shapes of letters, while language centers in the temporal lobe process meaning. The prefrontal cortex organizes comprehension, and even motor regions become subtly involved, as though rehearsing the movements of speech. Reading can also stimulate emotional areas, activating memory and imagination as you picture scenes and experience the emotions of characters. In this way, reading is one of the few activities that recruits nearly the entire brain. Every page is not just ink on paper, but a workout involving vision, language, memory, and empathy. This explains why reading strengthens cognition and why stories feel so immersive. They recruit the whole brain to create an inner world. Following words across a page is truly a whole brain experience. Every thought you have leaves a physical trace in your brain. Thoughts may seem intangible, but each one leaves a physical imprint. When neurons activate together, their connections become slightly stronger, a process often summarized by saying that cells that fire together wire together. Over time, repeated thoughts or habits carve pathways through the brain, making them easier to remember or repeat. This is why practicing gratitude can change your mood, or why rehearsing skills makes them feel natural. Even passing ideas cause microscopic adjustments in the synapses. The brain is like clay, reshaped from moment to moment by the currents of consciousness. This means that who you are today is built from the accumulation of your thoughts, each one leaving a mark on the living tissue of your mind. Nothing is lost. Every passing idea contributes to the architecture of the self, engraving a delicate and invisible history into the brain's vast network of connections. The brains of extreme athletes show special adaptations to fear. Free solo climbers, big wave surfers, and wingsuit flyers appear fearless in situations that most people would find overwhelming. Brain scans reveal that these extreme athletes often have unusual patterns of activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. Instead of showing heightened responses, their amygdalas remain calmer, allowing them to act with focus when others might freeze. Some of this may be innate, but much of it is also trained. Repeated exposure to danger conditions, the brain, teaching it to regulate fear and channel adrenaline. These adaptations give athletes an advantage, allowing them to perform clearly in potentially deadly environments. This does not mean they lack fear entirely. Rather, their brains process it differently, translating it into calm concentration. These findings show that even the most primal emotions, such as terror, can be reshaped through experience, sculpting the mind into something remarkably resilient under pressure. Some brains solve mathematical problems by recruiting visual regions. Not everyone approaches mathematics in the same way. In some people, solving equations activates not only the traditional numerical regions but also areas devoted to vision and spatial reasoning. They may see numbers as shapes, arrange calculations as mental diagrams, or imagine equations as movements through space. This visual approach can give them unique strengths, allowing rapid problem-solving or intuitive leaps that feel less like calculation and more like perception. Brain scans confirm that these individuals activate the occipital cortex, which is normally associated with vision, while working on mathematics. This suggests that mathematical thinking is not limited to a single brain circuit, but can recruit many different pathways depending on the individual. Numbers are not merely abstract symbols, but flexible tools, and the brain adapts to use them in any way it can. For some people, mathematics is not only logic, but a form of inner vision. Extreme memory champions use brain tricks that anyone can learn. People who compete in memory championships seem superhuman, memorizing thousands of digits or entire decks of cards in minutes. However, most of them were not born with unusual brains. Instead, they use ancient techniques such as the memory palace, where information is stored as vivid images placed along an imagined path through a familiar building. Brain scans show that when they perform these feats, regions linked to spatial navigation become unusually active, as though they were walking through mental landscapes filled with symbolic objects. This method works because the brain is naturally equipped to remember places and images much better than raw numbers. With practice, anyone can improve memory this way, although few reach championship levels. These findings show that extraordinary memory has less to do with innate talent and more to do with harnessing the brain's hidden strengths, turning recall into a creative act of imagination. The brain can completely restructure itself after only a few weeks of practice. It may seem that meaningful brain changes take years, but scans reveal that just a few weeks of practice can leave a measurable mark. Learning to juggle, for example, has been shown to increase gray matter in regions linked to hand-eye coordination after only 1 month. Language learning, music lessons, and even memory exercises can produce similar changes. This rapid remodeling highlights how sensitive the brain is to training and repetition. Circuits expand to meet demand, much like muscles growing through exercise. Even brief periods of dedicated effort reshape the architecture of the mind. The discovery is encouraging. Change does not require decades. With consistent practice, the brain begins rewiring itself almost immediately. The mind is a dynamic organ, constantly adapting and capable of growing at any stage of life. Every new skill learned leaves structural echoes, proof of the brain's extraordinary ability to transform. The brain's plasticity makes each person's path of growth unique. Although all human brains share the same basic structure, each one grows and adapts in a way that no other brain does. Plasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means that your experiences, habits, and environment sculpt unique patterns of connectivity. Even identical twins with the same deoxyribonucleic acid develop different brains as they live different lives. This uniqueness explains why people vary so widely in their talents, memories, and even vulnerabilities. Every choice you make, from hobbies and friendships to challenges you overcome, reshapes the neural map. Far from being fixed, the brain is a personal creation sculpted by living. This means there is no single model for growth. Your brain's pathways are as individual as your fingerprints. The story of your life is literally written into its folds, making your mind a unique landscape shaped by experiences that only you have lived. The brain sometimes moves your body before you decide to act. When you reach for a cup or press a button, it seems as though your conscious will drive the action. But experiments show that the brain's motor regions begin preparing movements fractions of a second before you become aware of deciding to make them. In the famous Libet experiment, brain activity predicting a choice appeared hundreds of milliseconds before participants reported making that choice. This suggests that consciousness may not initiate an action but instead narrate it afterward, weaving the sense of free will into a story. Although the debate continues, the findings raise profound questions. How much of what we do is consciously chosen, and how much is prepared unconsciously? Rather than diminishing human choice, this may highlight how deeply integrated conscious and unconscious processes truly are. You are not merely a pilot at the controls. You are also the aircraft, the engines, and the sky through which decisions fly. Your conscious mind may notice only a fraction of what your brain does. Conscious awareness is like the tip of an iceberg, visible but tiny compared with the vast and hidden world beneath it. Most brain activity occurs outside awareness, regulating heart rate, filtering sensory information, storing memories, and even shaping decisions before they rise to the surface. At any moment, the brain is processing millions of signals, but only a narrow stream enters consciousness. This stream is enough to give you a coherent sense of yourself and the world, but it represents only a fraction of the whole. Experiments show that choices, feelings, and perceptions often form unconsciously, with awareness arriving only afterward. The conscious mind is more like a narrator than a controller, telling the story of what the broader brain has already set in motion. It is humbling to realize that the self you know is only a small window into the mind's vast hidden theater. Brain scans can sometimes detect decisions before you become aware of them. In cutting-edge experiments, scientists have used brain scans to predict choices seconds before participants became consciously aware of deciding. For example, by monitoring activity in the prefrontal and parietal lobes, researchers were able to predict whether someone would press a button with the left or right hand long before that person reported making the decision. This does not mean that free will is an illusion, but it does suggest that decisions emerge gradually, shaped by unconscious activity that rises into awareness. Consciousness may be the final stage of a longer chain, the moment when the brain's hidden debate crosses a threshold. These studies blur the line between thought and action, raising profound questions about control and identity. If your brain knows before you do, who exactly is the you making the decision? Perhaps the self is not a single voice, but the culmination of countless neural whispers converging into consciousness. Brain processes images faster than the blink of an eye. Your eyes constantly receive information, but your brain is what makes sense of that stream. Astonishingly, research shows that the brain can process a visual image in only 13 milliseconds, far faster than the time it takes to blink. This remarkable speed allows you to recognize a friend's face in a crowd or notice a bird crossing the sky almost instantly. The brain's visual system works in parallel, with different regions decoding color, movement, shape, and depth at the same time before combining the pieces into a coherent scene. Its efficiency is so great that you often identify objects before becoming fully aware that you have seen them. This ultra-fast perception reveals how evolution has refined the brain for survival, giving humans the ability to react to the world in real time. Every glance is a silent miracle of speed and precision. The brain produces tiny magnetic fields with every thought. Whenever neurons activate, they create not only electrical signals but also weak magnetic fields. These fields are unimaginably small, billions of times weaker than Earth's magnetic field. However, sensitive instruments such as magnetoencephalography can detect them outside the skull. By measuring these magnetic whispers, scientists can map brain activity with remarkable precision, capturing changes from 1 millisecond to the next. This means that every thought, every flash of memory, and every dream leaves a magnetic trace in the air around your head. These signals are so delicate that they must be measured inside rooms shielded from all other electromagnetic noise. The existence of these fields highlights the brain's dual nature as both a biological and physical system, vibrating with electricity and magnetism. Although you cannot feel them, the magnetic echoes of your thoughts are constantly shining like invisible halos radiating from the most mysterious organ you carry. The brain does not feel pain. Paradoxically, the organ that creates your experience of pain cannot feel pain itself. Surgeons can operate on the brain while patients are awake. Although the surrounding tissues of the scalp and skull are sensitive, the brain's neurons do not have pain receptors. This is why brain surgery can be performed while patients remain fully conscious, allowing doctors to map brain regions by asking them to speak, move, or even laugh during the procedure. It also explains why headaches do not originate in brain tissue, but in surrounding structures such as blood vessels, muscles, and membranes. The brain is exquisitely sensitive to temperature, pressure, and chemistry in terms of how it functions, but its own tissue is insensitive to pain. This strange fact highlights the difference between perceiving pain and generating it. The brain is the conductor of the symphony of sensation, yet its own instrument remains curiously silent. Brain has a default mode network that lights up when you daydream. When your mind wanders, drifting toward past memories, imagining the future, or rehearsing conversations, a special group of regions called the default mode network comes to life. This network, which includes the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and other areas, is less active during focused external tasks but becomes highly active during introspection. Far from being idle, this network is believed to weave together the threads of your personal narrative, maintaining a sense of self over time. It connects memory with imagination, helping you simulate possible futures and reflect on meaning. The discovery of the default mode network reshaped neuroscience, showing that the brain's resting state is actually one of its busiest. Daydreaming, often dismissed as a distraction, turns out to be essential for creativity, self-reflection, and problem-solving. When your thoughts wander, your brain does not shut down. It is exploring the inner landscapes that make you who you are. Certain brain waves can synchronize among groups of people. When people gather together, their brains can subtly align. Studies using electroencephalograms have found that people watching the same movie, listening to music, or having a conversation can display synchronized patterns of brain waves. This phenomenon, sometimes called neural coupling, suggests that shared experiences literally bring minds into rhythm. Teachers and students, performers and audiences, and even groups of friends laughing together often show greater synchronization, reflecting shared focus and emotional connection. The effect may explain why collective experiences feel so powerful, why music unites crowds, and why stories have such a strong impact. In these moments, the boundaries between minds become blurred, as though individual brains were instruments in a larger orchestra of thought. The discovery reveals that human connection is not merely metaphorical, but measurable in brain rhythms, pulsing together in silent harmony when we share attention, emotion, and presence. Brain cells communicate not only through electricity, but also through flashes similar to light. Neurons communicate primarily through electrical impulses and chemical signals. But researchers have discovered that they can also emit tiny flashes of light known as biophotons. These extremely weak photons are produced during certain chemical reactions within neurons. Although faint, they suggest the possibility of a light-based layer of communication inside the brain. Some scientists speculate that these flashes could influence neural activity or simply be byproducts of metabolism, although their role remains a mystery. The idea that your thoughts may be accompanied by tiny sparks of light inside your skull is as poetic as it is profound. Although much remains to be discovered, the finding reminds us that the brain may contain levels of communication that still lie beyond our understanding. It is not only an electrical network, but perhaps also a luminous one, flickering with whispers of light that illuminate the hidden depths of consciousness. The brain produces more than 80 different neurochemicals. The brain is a bustling chemical laboratory that generates a vast variety of neurotransmitters and neuromodulators. These include familiar names such as dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, along with dozens of others that perform subtle and intricate functions, from regulating sleep and appetite to shaping mood, attention, and learning. Each chemical acts like a note in the symphony of the mind, balancing excitation and inhibition, sharpening focus, or easing stress. The sheer number, more than 80 known varieties, highlights the brain's complexity. It does not run on a single fuel but on an orchestra of molecules, each binding to billions of receptors and orchestrating thought and emotion. The balance is delicate. Changes in only one chemical can ripple throughout the entire system, altering perception and behavior. This biochemical richness makes the brain adaptable, resilient, and sometimes unpredictable. It is a reminder that every mood or idea emerges from the invisible interaction of a molecular storm. Dopamine shapes your sense of motivation and reward. Often called the pleasure chemical, dopamine is better understood as the brain's signal for motivation and reward prediction. When you anticipate something positive, such as a delicious meal, a text message from someone you love, or the satisfaction of completing a task, dopamine levels rise, pushing you forward. It does not simply make you feel good. It connects motivation with action, teaching the brain which behaviors are worth repeating. Too little dopamine can weaken drive and concentration, while too much can fuel compulsions or risky behavior. Dopamine influences everything from habit formation and addiction to everyday satisfaction and long-term goals. It is the brain's way of marking certain experiences with a bright indicator. This matters. Far from being a simple pleasure switch, dopamine is the architect of effort and desire, shaping the pursuit of joy and weaving motivation into the rhythm of daily life. Oxytocin can change how much you trust someone. Known as the bonding hormone, oxytocin flows during hugs, childbirth, and moments of closeness. In the brain, it increases trust, empathy, and social connection. Experiments show that people who receive oxytocin are more likely to cooperate, share, or take social risks. It is one of the key molecules that transform relationships into lasting bonds, weaving the invisible ties of family, friendship, and love. But oxytocin is not universally beneficial. It can also increase favoritism toward one's own group, emphasizing the division between us and them. This dual role reveals its evolutionary purpose, encouraging trust within close groups and strengthening survival, even at the cost of greater suspicion toward outsiders. The effects of oxytocin remind us that biology shapes even our deepest feelings of connection. Every warm embrace, every surge of trust, and every bond of love is supported by this small but powerful chemical messenger whispering through the brain. Serotonin influences mood, sleep, and appetite all at once. Serotonin is one of the brain's most versatile chemicals, influencing mood, sleep cycles, digestion, and even perception. Balanced serotonin levels are linked to feelings of calm and well-being, while imbalances are associated with depression and anxiety. It plays a crucial role in regulating appetite and sleep, helping the body maintain steady rhythms. Some psychedelic substances work by imitating serotonin, altering perception in profound ways. About 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the digestive system, highlighting the deep connection between digestion and mood known as the gut-brain axis. Serotonin demonstrates that no individual function in the brain exists in isolation. Instead, a single molecule can influence many aspects of life at the same time. Every moment of satisfaction, every night of peaceful rest, and every appetite for food or experience is shaped in part by serotonin's silent orchestration, joining mind and body in a shared chemical rhythm. The brain stores languages in different locations depending on the age at which they were learned. When you learn a second language as a child, your brain places it in the same region as the first language, seamlessly weaving the two together. But when you learn it later in life, the new language is stored in a slightly different area, nearby but separate. This separation helps explain why children can switch between languages effortlessly, while adults may struggle to suppress interference from their native language. Brain scans confirm that the timing of exposure shapes the architecture of language storage, highlighting the brain's flexibility during development. Early learning integrates languages into a single system. Later learning builds parallel but separate circuits. This discovery shows how the brain's plasticity changes with age and why childhood is such a valuable window of opportunity for language learning. It also emphasizes that even in adulthood, the brain remains adaptable, building new neural maps to hold new words and new worlds. The brain processes your inner voice in a way similar to external speech. That silent voice inside your head, the one that reads words, replays conversations, or plans what to say, is treated by your brain much like real sound. Brain imaging shows that inner speech activates auditory and language processing areas as though you were hearing your own words. This is why internal dialogue can feel so vivid and why the brain can sometimes confuse imagined voices with real ones, as happens in certain psychiatric conditions. The inner voice plays a crucial role in memory, planning, and self-regulation, giving thought a structured verbal form. Far from being an abstract phenomenon, it is a concrete process that resonates through auditory circuits. Every time you speak silently, your brain rehearses the sound without producing it, weaving language into thought. In a sense, you are always both the speaker and the listener within your own mind, narrating life as it unfolds from moment to moment. The adolescent brain rewires itself in waves of change. Adolescence is not just a storm of hormones, but a profound neurological remodeling. During the teenage years, the brain removes excess synapses, optimizing connections for greater efficiency while simultaneously strengthening circuits linked to decision-making, social interaction, and emotional regulation. These changes occur unevenly. The limbic system, which processes emotion and reward, develops earlier, while the prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment and impulse control, matures later. This imbalance helps explain thrill-seeking, risk-taking, and the emotional intensity of adolescent behavior. Far from being flaws, these changes prepare the brain for adulthood by encouraging flexibility, learning, and independence. The rewiring unfolds in waves, making adolescence a period of both vulnerability and extraordinary potential. What appears to be chaos is actually the brain reorganizing itself into a more powerful and efficient machine, laying the foundation for the architecture that will carry a person through the rest of life. The brain does not finish developing until the mid-20s. Although the body reaches physical maturity by the end of adolescence, the brain continues developing well into the 20s. The prefrontal cortex, the center of planning, reasoning, and impulse control, is one of the last regions to fully mature. This extended timeline helps explain why young adults may still struggle with long-term decision-making or risk assessment, even when they appear fully grown. It also highlights the flexibility of early adulthood, a period when the brain is still refining pathways for judgment, empathy, and self-control. Far from being static, these years represent the final stage of brain development, combining youthful adaptability with the growing stability of maturity. Understanding this can reshape how we view the challenges of early adulthood, not as failures but as part of the brain's natural process of completing its masterpiece. By the mid-20s, the architecture of thought finally settles more firmly into place. A baby's brain builds up to 1 million new connections every second. During the first years of life, the brain grows at an astonishing rate. Every second, up to 1 million new synaptic connections bloom between neurons, weaving the foundations of perception, language, and movement. This explosive growth is fueled by the infant's constant absorption of the surrounding world. Every sound, sight, and touch is written into neural architecture. By the age of 3, a child's brain has many more synapses than an adult brain, forming a lush network that is later refined through synaptic pruning. This early abundance explains the extraordinary learning ability of young children, who acquire languages, motor skills, and patterns with ease. It is a period of remarkable neural construction, as though the brain were racing to establish every possible pathway to ensure survival and adaptability. The pace may slow later, but the early years leave lasting marks, shaping the foundations of intelligence and personality for life. Babies are born with nearly all the neurons they will have throughout life. At birth, a baby already carries about 86 billion neurons, nearly a lifetime supply. What changes dramatically after birth is not the number of neurons, but the connections between them. Synapses rapidly emerge as the baby encounters the world, linking neurons into networks that support perception, movement, and language. The enormous number of neurons present at birth provides the raw potential, but experience sculpts the pathways, determining which circuits thrive and which are removed. This balance between abundance and refinement gives human beings their remarkable adaptability, allowing each child to grow within a unique environment. The fact that nearly all neurons are present at birth is a reminder that the brain arrives prepared for a lifetime of learning. It is not empty, but equipped with enormous potential, waiting for the world to shape the dense forest of connections that define thought. A child's brain is far more flexible than an adult's brain. Children can recover from injuries, adapt to new environments, and learn skills in ways that adults often cannot. This extraordinary flexibility comes from heightened neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. For example, when a child suffers damage to one hemisphere, the other can sometimes take over lost functions, a feat that is much more difficult in adults. Languages learned during childhood become seamlessly integrated, while adults may struggle with accent and fluency. A child's brain is like wet clay, easily shaped by experience, while an adult brain is more like hardened pottery, still adaptable but less fluid. This plasticity comes at a cost. Children may be more vulnerable to harmful environments because their brains absorb influences deeply. Even so, the flexibility of the young mind explains its astonishing capacity for growth and adaptation, shaping individuals into unique reflections of both biology and experience. Older brains still generate new neurons in certain regions. For much of the 20th century, scientists believed that adults could not produce new neurons. However, research has challenged this belief, showing that neurogenesis may continue into old age, especially in the hippocampus, a region central to memory and learning. These new neurons may help preserve cognitive flexibility, supporting the ability to adapt, learn, and form new memories even later in life. Exercise, enriched environments, and even meditation have been associated with processes that may support neurogenesis, suggesting practical ways to nurture the aging brain. Although the overall pace of growth slows compared with childhood, the possibility that it continues is remarkable. It means that the brain is never completely fixed but remains capable of change even in advanced years. This discovery reframes aging not simply as inevitable decline, but as a stage in which growth, renewal, and transformation may still unfold quietly within the mind. Some people maintain remarkable cognitive abilities into very old age. Although many associate aging with mental decline, some individuals preserve exceptional memory, focus, and problem-solving skills well into their 80s or 90s. Brain scans reveal that these people often have thicker cortices and stronger connectivity in regions related to attention and memory, resembling the brains of much younger individuals. Lifestyle factors such as physical activity, social interaction, lifelong learning, and resilience may contribute, although genetics also plays a role. These individuals challenge the assumption that decline is inevitable, showing that some brains do not merely endure but continue to thrive with age. Their stories are inspiring reminders of the brain's resilience. Even as the years accumulate, the mind can remain clear, agile, and bright. Each case is living proof that the brain's journey does not follow a single path. For some people, it continues to shine strongly far beyond what most would expect. Alzheimer's disease slowly dismantles neural networks. Alzheimer's disease is one of the most devastating neurological conditions, progressively eroding memory, language, and reasoning. It begins with the accumulation of amyloid plaques and tau tangles, toxic proteins that disrupt communication between neurons. As networks break down, the hippocampus, the center of memory, is one of the first regions to fail. Over time, entire circuits collapse, leaving gaps in identity and awareness. What makes Alzheimer's disease so tragic is not only the loss of cognition, but the unraveling of the self as memories and personality fade. However, research also highlights resilience. Some brains develop plaques without showing symptoms, suggesting the existence of protective factors that are still being investigated. Understanding Alzheimer's disease is a race against time, with scientists working to slow, prevent, or reverse its course. The disease reminds us of the brain's fragility, but also of its profound importance as the guardian of who we are. Some people's brains continue functioning for minutes after the heart stops. When the heart stops beating, most of the body begins shutting down almost immediately, but the brain can persist for a short time. In some cases, brain activity has continued for several minutes after cardiac arrest, producing measurable waves that resemble patterns seen during deep sleep or meditation. Some people revived after cardiac arrest have even reported vivid awareness during the period when they were clinically dead, describing tunnels of light, voices, or an expanded sense of time. Scientists debate whether these experiences arise from residual bursts of electrical activity, a brain entering an intense survival state, or something still not fully understood. What is clear is that the brain does not shut down like a light switch. Instead, its activity fades gradually, continuing in flashes and murmurs during its final moments. These remaining patterns remind us that consciousness may not vanish at the exact instant the heart stops, but can linger briefly as the brain gradually releases its hold. The brain can be tricked into believing that a fake rubber hand belongs to it. In the famous rubber hand illusion, a person places their real hand out of sight while a highly realistic rubber hand is positioned in front of them. When both the hidden hand and the fake hand are stroked at the same time, the brain merges the signals. Within minutes, many people begin to feel as though the rubber hand is their own. Some even flinch when it is threatened. This experiment reveals how flexible the sense of body ownership can be. The brain constantly weaves sensory input into a seamless sense of self, but it can be deceived. The illusion shows that our sense of embodiment is not fixed but constructed from moment to moment. By changing the rules, scientists have demonstrated how easily the brain can be persuaded to redraw the boundaries of the body. What you experience as yourself is partly a fragile story that the brain tells and can rewrite. The brain can fill in missing vision, creating a seamless reality. Your eyes contain a natural blind spot where the optic nerve exits the retina, leaving a gap in your vision. Yet you never notice it because your brain automatically fills the missing area with surrounding details. This happens not only with the blind spot, but in broader ways as well. When information is missing or hidden, the brain invents plausible details to preserve the illusion of continuous perception. If part of a pattern is covered, you still see it as a whole. If letters are blurred, your mind supplies the missing shapes. The result is a seamless reality that feels complete. Although the gaps are constantly being patched, this creative editing shows that perception is not a passive recording but an active construction. At every moment, the brain is quietly painting in the blank spaces, producing a world so smooth and convincing that you rarely realize it is partly imagined. People with certain brain injuries cannot recognize faces, even those of their loved ones. Imagine looking at your partner, your child, or your closest friend and seeing only a stranger. This is the reality of prosopagnosia, also known as face blindness, which is often caused by damage to a small area of the brain called the fusiform gyrus. People with this condition can see every individual feature, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, but cannot assemble them into a recognizable whole. Instead, they may rely on voices, clothing, or mannerisms. Some describe faces as all looking alike. The most heartbreaking part is that even deep emotional recognition can disappear. A loved one may feel unfamiliar. This reveals how specialized the brain is. One tiny area can govern the immense social ability to recognize faces. For those who live with this condition, every introduction and encounter can feel like meeting someone new, even when it is someone they have known their entire life. Some people may see auras around others because of unusual patterns in brain perception. Some people report seeing glowing colors flickering around bodies, often described as auras. Although mystical explanations are common, science suggests that in at least some cases, this may come from neurological differences. A condition called synesthesia can cause the senses to blend, making emotions or personalities trigger perceptions of color. In rare visual processing differences, bright halos may appear around edges, especially in high-contrast situations. People who experience migraines sometimes see flashing lights or colored outlines, which may contribute to aura-like experiences. Although not everyone perceives them, these brain-based phenomena demonstrate how subjective vision can be. For those who experience them, the world may appear filled with extra layers of light and color connected to perception rather than external reality. Whether mystical, neurological, or somewhere in between, auras highlight how the brain can transform ordinary sensory input into something vivid, strange, and deeply personal. Brain sometimes creates sensations that do not exist. Your brain can produce feelings, touches, sounds, and even smells that seem to come from nowhere. This phenomenon, known as paresthesia or hallucination, reveals that perception is generated within the nervous system, not simply received from the outside world. People may feel buzzing, tingling, or the sensation of something crawling on their skin without any physical stimulus. They may hear phantom sounds, such as tinnitus, or smell odors that are not present. These experiences occur when the brain misfires, activating sensory regions without incoming information. They remind us that reality as we experience it is a product of how the brain interprets signals, and that those signals can arise internally. Although sometimes unsettling, these phantom sensations highlight the creativity of the nervous system. The brain is not merely a receiver, but a generator capable of producing entire sensory experiences from nothing, vivid enough to feel completely real. Phantom pain can be reduced by watching a mirror illusion. People who have undergone amputations often experience phantom limb pain, including discomfort, cramping, or burning in a limb that no longer exists. One of the most effective treatments requires nothing more than a mirror. In mirror therapy, the patient places the intact limb beside a mirror, creating the illusion that both limbs are present. When the healthy limb moves, the brain interprets the reflection as the missing limb, updating its internal body map. For many people, this simple trick reduces pain, sometimes dramatically. The therapy works because the brain's representation of the body can be recalibrated through visual feedback. What the eyes see can override what the nerves continue to report. This elegant solution demonstrates how closely perception and reality are intertwined. Even the absence of a limb can be eased through a carefully designed illusion, proving the brain's willingness to believe what it sees. The brain creates phantom limbs that feel real even when they are gone. After an amputation, many people continue to feel the presence of the missing limb, sometimes with astonishing vividness. They may feel their fingers moving, their toes curling, or their hand resting on their lap even though the limb is no longer there. These phantom limbs arise because the body's map stored in the brain, particularly in the somatosensory cortex, does not update immediately. Neurons representing the missing body part continue to activate, creating sensations as though it were still present. Over time, the brain may reorganize, but for many people, the phantom remains, sometimes for years. This illustrates how the brain constructs the experience of the body internally rather than simply from physical feedback. Your sense of embodiment is a neurological creation, and once established, it can outlast the body itself. Phantom limbs are a moving but fascinating reminder of the mind's power to create presence from absence. Small strokes can permanently alter personality. Not all strokes are dramatic. Some are small and almost undetectable at first. Yet even tiny strokes, depending on their location, can reshape personality in profound ways. A small interruption in blood flow may affect the frontal lobes, causing sudden impulsivity, loss of empathy, or flattened emotions. Others may trigger irritability, apathy, or an unusual fixation on routines. Families often notice the change first. A loved one feels different, somehow no longer like themselves. These changes reveal how closely identity is tied to specific neural circuits. We like to imagine personality as a stable essence, but it is also a fragile construction based on the function of delicate networks of cells. Small strokes expose this hidden truth. Even subtle damage can shift the balance of the traits that define us, reminding us how much of who we are depends on the brain's quiet health. The brain has specialized cells that map your physical surroundings. Inside the hippocampus are remarkable neurons called place cells. They activate only when you are in a specific location, essentially forming an internal map of space. First discovered in rats and later confirmed in humans, these cells allow you to know where you are in a room, a city, or even a maze of hallways. Related cells called grid cells provide a coordinate system that maps the geometry of your environment. Together, they give the brain a built-in global positioning system. This system explains how you can navigate familiar places without thinking or suddenly remember a layout after many years. It is also why damage to the hippocampus can cause disorientation, depriving the brain of its spatial compass. These specialized cells show that memory and navigation are deeply connected. Knowing where you are is tied to knowing where you have been, and the brain records both with extraordinary precision. The brain's hippocampus acts like a time machine for memory. Deep inside your brain, the hippocampus weaves experiences together and turns them into memories. When you recall the past, it does not simply retrieve a recording. It reconstructs the moment piece by piece, like replaying a movie. Scientists have discovered that activity in the hippocampus during recall mirrors its activity during the original event, as though it were traveling back in time to the experience. That is why memories can feel so immersive. You do not merely know what happened, you relive it. The hippocampus is also critical for imagining the future. Damage to this area not only erases memory, but can also prevent people from imagining tomorrow. The past and the future are built through the same mechanism, recombining fragments of experience. In this way, the hippocampus serves as your personal time machine, carrying you backward into yesterday and forward into the realm of possibility. Without it, you would be stranded in the present, unable to travel through your own life. Some people can remember events from inside the womb. It sounds impossible, but some people report vivid memories of sensations from before birth. Scientists once dismissed this as imagination. However, research shows that fetuses in the later stages of development can form memories, responding to sounds, music, or voices they repeatedly hear in the womb. After birth, newborns recognize these sounds, becoming calmer when they hear their mother's voice or familiar melodies. In rare cases, adults claim to consciously remember these earliest impressions. These prenatal memories remain controversial, but they highlight the brain's astonishing ability to encode experience even before we breathe air. Whether remembered directly or stored unconsciously, the womb leaves its mark. A soundscape of muffled voices, rhythmic heartbeats, and surrounding warmth. Such claims remind us that memory may begin earlier than we imagine, and that even before birth, the brain is already gathering time, preserving impressions of the first world we ever know. Brain produces waves strong enough to be detected outside the skull. Your brain never stops humming with electricity. Neurons fire in synchronized rhythms that produce measurable oscillations known as brain waves. These patterns, alpha, beta, theta, and delta, reflect different states of thought, rest, and sleep. What is remarkable is that these waves are strong enough to be recorded from outside the skull using techniques such as electroencephalography. Electrodes placed on the scalp detect the faint currents and translate brain activity into visible waves on a screen. Even without direct contact, sensitive instruments can detect magnetic fields generated by neural activity. This means that, in principle, the hidden rhythms of thought extend beyond the body, radiating softly into space. Although they cannot be read like an open book, the fact that our inner states leave echoes outside us is astonishing. Every thought, dream, and sensation sends faint signals into the world, tiny traces of the brain's endless electrical symphony. Scientists have reconstructed sounds from brain activity. Imagine hearing music that exists only inside someone else's mind. Neuroscientists are moving closer to that possibility. By analyzing patterns of brain activity while people listen to specific words or sounds, researchers have been able to reconstruct approximate versions of what they were hearing. In some experiments, computer models trained on neural signals generated recognizable speech using brain data alone. The reconstructions are imperfect, ghostly, and distorted, like listening through static. But they suggest a future in which inner experiences could be translated outward. This technology could one day give a voice to people who cannot speak by decoding words that form silently in their minds. It also raises profound questions. If thoughts can be reconstructed, where is the boundary between mind and machine? For now, the idea that electrical impulses in the brain can be transformed into audible sound feels like science fiction gradually becoming reality. The brain sometimes produces sudden flashes of insight from nowhere. Every so often, a solution or idea bursts into awareness fully formed, as though delivered by lightning. These moments of revelation occur when different brain regions suddenly synchronize. Studies show that just before an insight, activity in the temporal lobe rises sharply while the brain's rhythms shift toward gamma waves. In that instant, separate ideas are woven into a new whole. The experience feels magical because it bypasses conscious reasoning. The answer simply appears. Many creative breakthroughs, from scientific discoveries to artistic inspiration, have emerged from such flashes. The brain seems to have a workshop behind the scenes, quietly combining fragments until the curtain rises. These moments remind us that thinking is not always deliberate. Sometimes the greatest achievements arrive uninvited, like gifts. The mind works silently and then suddenly offers a spark that can change everything. The brain lights up differently when you are in love. Love is not just an emotion. It is an event involving the entire brain. Scans show that when people are in love, regions linked to reward, motivation, and pleasure, especially the caudate nucleus and the ventral tegmental area, become highly active. Dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical, surges, producing euphoria, longing, and intense focus on the person you love. At the same time, regions linked to judgment and negative emotions become less active, helping explain the tendency to see everything through rose-colored glasses. In long-term bonds, another network emerges. Oxytocin and vasopressin circuits promote trust and attachment. The pattern of activation shifts from intense obsession to steady companionship. To the brain, love is not abstract. It is chemistry, wiring, and circuits working together. Yet what emerges from this activity feels greater than biology, a force that reshapes perception, fuels devotion, and gives human life its deepest connections. Baby's brain doubles in size during the first year of life. At birth, a baby's brain is only about 1/4 of its final adult size. Yet within a single year, it doubles, exploding with new connections at a rate never matched later in life. Neurons branch into dense forests of synapses, laying the foundations for movement, language, and social understanding. A baby forms up to 1 million new connections every second, all shaped by experience. Every touch, sound, and smile helps build the architecture of the mind. By the age of 3, the brain contains twice as many synapses as an adult brain, an excess that will later be pruned for efficiency. This early overgrowth ensures that infants can adapt to any environment into which they are born. The astonishing growth of the first year reveals that the brain is not simply pre-programmed but actively shaped by the world, a living construction project unfolding at breathtaking speed. Some brains can withstand extreme injuries and continue functioning. There are remarkable cases of people living with catastrophic brain damage who function far better than anyone would have expected. One well-known man lived a normal life even though much of his cerebral cortex was missing and his skull was largely filled with fluid. Others have survived with only half a brain and still learn to walk, speak, and even attend school. This resilience comes from neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself. When one region is damaged, other areas can sometimes take over its functions, especially in children. Although there are limits, these stories reveal astonishing adaptability. The brain is not rigid hardware, but a flexible network capable of redirecting itself under pressure. Such survival challenges intuition. We imagine the brain as fragile, yet it is also profoundly resilient, capable of enduring major losses while still preserving the spark of consciousness against overwhelming odds. Your brain is the most complex known structure in the universe. Across the cosmos, we find galaxies, nebulae, and stars. But nothing we know compares with the intricate complexity of the human brain. It contains about 86 billion neurons, each connected to thousands of others, forming trillions of synapses. The number of possible connection patterns exceeds the number of atoms in the observable universe. Within this labyrinth reside consciousness, perception, thought, memory, and imagination. No other known structure contains so much functional density in such a small space. The brain is not only a receiver of the world, but a creator of inner worlds capable of producing art, science, and reflection. Calling it complex almost feels inadequate. It is a living universe of endlessly shifting connections. As far as we know, no star system or black hole compares with the mystery resting silently inside your skull, a cosmos folded into flesh. Neurons can change the strength of their connections within minutes. Learning does not always require weeks or months. Inside the brain, there is a process called long-term potentiation through which some connections between neurons become stronger only minutes after a meaningful experience. When two neurons repeatedly activate at the same time, communication between them becomes more efficient, allowing information to travel more easily in the future. This mechanism is one of the biological foundations of learning and the formation of lasting memories. Over time, if those connections continue to be used, even deeper structural changes can emerge, consolidating new neural networks. If they are no longer used, the strengthening may gradually fade. In this way, every conversation, skill, or discovery begins modifying the brain almost immediately, showing that the mind is continuously reshaping itself even during the most ordinary experiences. Brain automatically distinguishes human voices from thousands of sounds. In any crowded place, such as a restaurant filled with conversations or a busy street, the brain can detect the presence of a human voice with remarkable speed. Even before understanding the words, specialized regions of the auditory cortex identify the characteristic patterns of speech and separate them from surrounding environmental sounds. This ability makes it possible to focus on a specific conversation even when dozens of people are speaking at the same time, a phenomenon known as the cocktail party effect. The brain analyzes tone, rhythm, sound direction, and many other acoustic features to decide which voice deserves attention. This processing happens automatically and within fractions of a second, allowing communication to remain effective even in very noisy environments. Thanks to this extraordinary ability, human social interaction can continue under conditions that would be extremely complex for a conventional computer. Neurons continue producing new proteins while memories are being formed. Every important memory leaves a physical trace in the brain, but for that trace to remain for years, new proteins must be produced inside the neurons. When an experience is especially meaningful, certain genes become active and begin producing molecules that strengthen synapses and stabilize newly created connections. Without this process, many memories would disappear only a few hours after being formed. Researchers have found that temporarily blocking protein synthesis prevents some recent memories from becoming permanently consolidated, even when the experience itself occurred normally. This shows that remembering does not depend only on electrical impulses but also on complex molecular machinery that continues working silently after learning. Every lasting memory is the result of millions of tiny biological factories operating at the same time, building the physical architecture of memory while we remain almost completely unaware of it. The brain can recognize a familiar face even when it sees only a small part of it. You do not need to see an entire face to know who is standing in front of you. In many situations, seeing the eyes, the shape of the forehead, or even the particular way someone moves their head is enough for the brain to identify that person immediately. This extraordinary ability exists because the brain does not store only complete photographs, but highly complex patterns of facial features that can be reconstructed even from partial information. Specialized areas such as the fusiform gyrus work together to compare those fragments with thousands of faces stored in memory. This is why you can recognize a relative from far away, through a window, or while part of the face is covered. Identification happens so quickly that we usually do not notice the enormous computational work performed by the brain. What seems like a simple glance involves millions of comparisons completed within only fractions of a second. The brain constantly changes the strength of its connections while you are awake. Throughout the day, millions of synapses slightly adjust their strength in response to everything you experience. Every conversation, every image, every sound, and every thought produces small changes in communication between neurons. Some connections become stronger because they carry useful information, while others begin to weaken when they are no longer used. This balance prevents the brain from becoming overloaded and preserves the flexibility needed to continue learning throughout life. Scientists believe that this continuous adjustment makes it possible to prioritize relevant information without creating new neurons for every experience. Far from being a fixed structure, the brain is more like a city where thousands of roads constantly change their traffic according to the needs of the moment. Each day ends with a neural network that is slightly different from the one that existed when the morning began. Neurons consume enormous amounts of energy to remain silent. It may seem that a neuron only needs energy when it sends an electrical impulse, but the opposite is true. Even when it is not transmitting signals, most of its work involves carefully maintaining the difference in electrical charge between the inside and outside of its membrane. To accomplish this, molecular pumps operate continuously, moving sodium and potassium across the cell membrane and consuming large amounts of adenosine triphosphate, the body's primary source of energy. This delicate balance allows neurons to remain ready to respond instantly when they receive a signal. If the energy supply is interrupted for only a few minutes, those electrical differences begin to disappear, and neural communication becomes impossible. Much of the energy consumed by the brain is not used for active thinking, but for remaining prepared in silence, waiting for the next thought, memory, or movement. Brain can identify mistakes before you become fully aware that you made them. Many people experience a strange feeling that something went wrong even before they understand exactly what the mistake was. This perception has a neurological explanation. An electrical response known as error-related negativity appears only a few dozen milliseconds after an error is made. Regions such as the anterior cingulate cortex automatically detect the difference between the expected action and the action that actually occurred, sending signals to correct the behavior almost immediately. In many experiments, this brain activity can be recorded before the person is able to consciously explain what they did wrong. Thanks to this system, the brain continuously learns from its own mistakes without requiring deliberate analysis. It is an extraordinarily fast self-correction mechanism that improves learning, refines skills, and reduces the likelihood of repeating the same mistakes in the future. The brain adjusts the sensitivity of the senses according to context. The intensity with which you perceive the world changes constantly without your awareness. When you enter a dark room, the visual system gradually increases its sensitivity to capture the limited amount of available light. When you remain in a noisy environment for several minutes, the auditory system readjusts its response to distinguish important sounds more effectively. The same process occurs with touch, smell, and the other senses. The brain continuously changes sensitivity levels according to the environment and the needs of the moment, optimizing the use of available information. This dynamic adjustment allows perception to remain effective under very different conditions without requiring physical changes to the sensory organs. In reality, much of what we perceive depends less on the eyes, ears, or skin than on the extraordinary adaptive work performed by the brain behind every conscious experience. The brain keeps different internal clocks running at the same time. Although we usually think there is only one biological clock, the brain uses multiple specialized timing systems. Some circuits calculate intervals lasting only milliseconds to coordinate precise movements, while others track seconds or minutes during conversation and planning. Meanwhile, the suprachiasmatic nucleus synchronizes the circadian rhythms that regulate sleep, body temperature, and hormone release over approximately 24 hours. These clocks operate simultaneously and exchange information to keep very different functions coordinated. Thanks to this organization, you can maintain balance while walking, follow the rhythm of a song, estimate how long it will take for a traffic light to change, and know approximately when it is time to sleep. The brain does not measure time with a single stopwatch, but through a complex network of specialized biological clocks operating in perfect synchronization. The brain automatically reorganizes information to make future decisions easier. Every experience you have is not simply stored as an isolated memory. As you learn, the brain continuously compares new information with previous knowledge, groups similar concepts together, and reorganizes its networks so future decisions can be made faster and more efficiently. Instead of storing millions of independent memories, it builds internal models that anticipate similar situations and respond more quickly when they arise again. This process explains why gaining experience in any field allows you to recognize increasingly complex patterns without consciously analyzing them. An experienced physician identifies diseases quickly, a musician anticipates a melody, and a chess player recognizes familiar positions almost instantly. Behind that apparent intuition is a brain that has spent years quietly reorganizing its information, transforming thousands of individual experiences into integrated knowledge capable of guiding new decisions with remarkable efficiency. Brain can complete words before you finish reading them. As your eyes move across a line of text, the brain does not wait to identify every letter before understanding the meaning. Instead, it uses context, grammar, and previous experience to anticipate which word will appear next. That is why you can read sentences where some letters are switched or recognize partially hidden words with little effort. Specialized language regions work together with predictive systems that constantly compare visual information with thousands of patterns stored in memory. This mechanism dramatically speeds up reading and allows you to understand text at remarkable speed. However, it also explains why we sometimes overlook obvious typographical errors or read exactly what we expected to find instead of what is actually written. Reading is not simply decoding symbols. It is an ongoing collaboration between your eyes and a brain that is constantly trying to stay one step ahead of the next idea. Neurons use extraordinarily precise timing to transmit information. The speed at which nerve impulses travel is not the only important factor in brain communication. The exact moment when each signal reaches its destination is just as important. Many neurons adjust their responses with differences of only a few milliseconds, allowing millions of messages to be coordinated with extraordinary precision. If these tiny timing differences were significantly disrupted, functions such as balance, coordination, or the recognition of complex sounds would begin to deteriorate. The brain depends as much on the timing of information as it does on the information itself. It is like an orchestra where it is not enough for every musician to play the correct notes. They must also play them at precisely the right moment. Every thought, movement, and perception depends on extraordinarily precise timing that occurs millions of times every second without us ever noticing it. The brain can recognize a melody even when it is played in a completely different key. A song remains recognizable even when it is performed in a much higher or much lower key than the original. This happens because the brain pays far more attention to the relationships between notes than to their absolute frequencies. Auditory regions identify patterns of intervals, rhythms, and musical structures that remain almost unchanged, even when every note shifts in pitch. Thanks to this ability, you can recognize a melody played on a piano, a violin, a guitar, or even whistled by someone else. The brain extracts the essence of the musical pattern and compares it with representations stored in memory. This ability demonstrates that auditory perception depends not only on registering sounds, but also on discovering the hidden relationships between them. Music becomes more than a sequence of individual notes. It becomes an architecture of patterns that the brain recognizes with extraordinary ease. Connections between neurons are constantly competing to remain active. Inside the brain, there is a silent competition that never stops. Millions of synapses strive to maintain their strength through frequent use. Connections that repeatedly participate in important thoughts, skills, or memories receive more biological resources and tend to become stronger. Meanwhile, those that remain inactive for long periods gradually weaken. This process allows the brain to use its energy efficiently, preserving the most useful networks while reducing the less necessary ones. It is not an arbitrary loss, but a way of optimizing continuous learning. Every new piece of knowledge changes the balance among thousands of connections that cooperate and compete at the same time. Thanks to this ongoing reorganization, the brain can adapt to new experiences without endlessly increasing its number of neurons or connections. Brain builds internal maps of space even when you are not paying attention. As you walk through a new building or along an unfamiliar street, your brain records far more than the path you are consciously following. Specialized cells in the hippocampus and the entorhinal cortex create internal maps representing the positions of objects, distances, and directions of movement. Even when you are not trying to memorize the route, these networks begin organizing spatial information automatically. Thanks to this process, after several visits, you can move naturally through places that once seemed confusing. This system also allows you to calculate shortcuts, recognize alternate routes, and maintain your sense of direction even when your starting point changes. The brain does not simply store a list of turns. It builds a flexible representation of space that can be continuously updated as new paths, buildings, or visual landmarks appear. Neurons can change their responses based on their recent activity. The same neuron does not always respond the same way to an identical stimulus. Its behavior also depends on what happened seconds or minutes earlier. If it has been highly active, it may temporarily reduce its sensitivity to prevent overstimulation. If it has remained relatively inactive, it may respond more strongly to the next impulse. This phenomenon allows the brain to maintain a constant balance between stability and flexibility. Thanks to these dynamic adjustments, important information continues to stand out while background noise becomes less prominent. Together, millions of neurons continuously adjust their responsiveness, adapting to the needs of the moment. Far from acting like simple switches that turn on or off, neurons constantly fine-tune their behavior, forming an extraordinarily flexible network capable of responding effectively to a world that never stops changing. The brain can automatically separate a person's voice from the echoes around it. When you are talking in a large room or a building with strong reverberation, sound reaches your ears along with multiple reflections from walls and other surfaces. Even so, you usually understand the words without difficulty. This is possible because the brain analyzes extremely small differences in the arrival time and intensity of each sound, distinguishing which one comes directly from the speaker and which ones are echoes. This processing happens so quickly that we are barely aware of it. Thanks to this ability, communication remains effective even in churches, auditoriums, tunnels, or large halls. What can become a confusing mixture for a conventional microphone is reorganized by the human brain into a clear conversation through sophisticated calculations performed automatically every moment. The brain can learn to ignore constant stimuli so it can focus on what matters. After wearing a watch, putting on a pair of glasses, or staying in a room with a constant humming sound for several minutes, many people almost stop noticing those sensations. This happens because the brain recognizes that certain stimuli remain constant and probably do not contain information relevant to survival or decision-making. As a result, it gradually reduces the attention devoted to them and frees up resources to process more important changes in the environment. This mechanism explains why we stop feeling our clothes against our skin or stop noticing the steady sound of a fan. Sensory adaptation does not eliminate the physical stimulus. Instead, it changes the priority that stimulus receives within the nervous system. The brain is always deciding what deserves immediate attention and what can quietly remain in the background without affecting our interaction with the world. Neurons form specialized circuits to recognize sequences, not just objects. The brain does not simply identify isolated images, sounds, or words. It also learns patterns that occur in a specific order. This ability allows it to anticipate the next note in a melody, understand the structure of a sentence, or perform complex movements such as writing or playing a musical instrument. These specialized circuits detect temporal relationships between consecutive events and use that information to predict what is most likely to happen next. The ability to recognize sequences is a fundamental part of human learning and plays a role in activities as diverse as language, music, sports, and problem-solving. Without these mechanisms, it would be extremely difficult to acquire skills that depend on a precise sequence of actions. The brain does not only understand individual elements, it also discovers the hidden order that connects them, allowing experience to become organized knowledge. Brain never stops reorganizing itself as long as you remain alive. For a long time, scientists believed that brain development ended upon reaching adulthood. Today, we know that reorganization continues throughout life. Every experience, conversation, emotion, lesson, or challenge slightly modifies the activity of millions of neural connections. Although some changes occur more rapidly during childhood, the adult brain retains a remarkable ability to adapt to new circumstances. Learning a language, mastering a manual skill, changing careers, or partially recovering from certain injuries are examples of the enormous potential for reorganization that the nervous system maintains even at advanced ages. This ability makes the brain a deeply dynamic structure that never remains exactly the same from one day to the next. Each day leaves a microscopic mark on its architecture, showing that a person's story continues to be written silently into the living tissue of their own mind. After exploring these fascinating discoveries, it becomes clear that the brain is much more than an organ. It is the source of our reality, our memories, our emotions, and everything that makes us who we are. And as science continues revealing its mysteries, one certainty remains: the the greatest universe we can explore may have always existed inside our own minds.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss more interesting content. Leave your comments and click on any of these videos. See you next time.